All right, you're up, Ryan.
Oh, I was
Oh.
just, he's here to help.
Oh, okay.
So, because he
Said HR
he
my paper.
hasn't seen all of these.
Okay.
So, this part of the meeting was going to be just to catch Ryan up on and be a part of discussions on salaries, so that the clerk knows how we want to continue for the clerk's recommendation. We had multiple new position requests. The consensus of the board has just been kind of to run through those and see what's going to be required and justified. Those I'm not sure, we can check with you when we get to those to verify that the grades, if they're new positions. Otherwise, they'll probably be existing positions that are already graded. But we'll get with you on those to make sure that you agree on those.
Okay, thanks.
The other item that we were going to discuss is just the salaries and how we want to address COLAs, steps, grade changes, do a combination of retention stipends so that we're not obligated for future years, and do COLAs, or how we wanted to do that. Within the department requests, we received anywhere from like a 3% to I think the courts did like an 8%.
There was one that was 10
right.
plus COLA.
Yeah.
Yeah, that can happen.
Yeah, that won't necessarily work. COLAs traditionally have been pretty much based on, it'd be ideal to be a CPI or something like that, but it's more based on what we can afford.
To continue our conversation earlier today, because we were talking about landfill, because I think that as I've talked and read, I think road and bridge and landfill have it backwards. We've graded out these positions, and typically the positions, up until this last little bit, they're pretty much equal, but it used to be you'd make more money going to landfill. And I think we really got that messed up, because the landfill is actually the key component that no matter what has to be open. If you don't get a road paved this year, you don't have to get a road paved. And at lunch, I actually went home and was doing some research on, I think for some of those positions, I think the way you do it, because it's not a long-term obligation then, is you do it like a shift differential, like we've talked in the past. Because then you say, for like the landfill, hey, an operator is an operator, you can be either one, but you'll have a shift differential of like $3 an hour or whatever you do. And you do it substantially because we actually want people, the landfill needs to be the top. That's the one that's got to survive. And we've had this backwards for years. And so really, because then what that does is that doesn't obligate you to, because you can adjust your shift differential at any time. That's not a,
It's built into the base.
it's not built into the base.
Right.
And so that's where I was thinking of, even in some of your sheriff's deputies, some of the other ways, that's a way to get away from having that long-term obligation, is you say, hey, landfill, a senior operator at the landfill and a senior operator at Road and Bridge. Senior operator at the landfill will make $4 more an hour.
So landfill differential.
The landfill differential.
Yeah.
You can have a sheriff's, a deputy's differential. You can have some of those that we set up, because then that meets your, hey, a way to keep people. And to tell you the truth, if all of a sudden you're getting 10,000 applicants to go be a jailer or an operator, you can do away with the shift differential if everybody's willing to work at that. Then you're not dealing with that long term. But what it does though is, for right now, you can have that shift differential that you put into place that, hey, deputies, we have 11 openings that can't get filled. Yeah, we're going to take those 5 or 6 people, we're going to convert those funds into a shift differential fund, and yeah, we'll pay you more right now because we know that you're going to work a lot of hours.
And that could trickle up through the sergeants and
you can use
corporals and so on.
Yep, to help fill those shifts. Or like Tony was saying, the marshals here, there's a couple of them that go out and fill overtime shifts out at the jail. And that's what you're doing in those shift differentials, to pick up the jail. But then if you start getting all those applicants back in, you just remove that differential. Then you're not in a long term, and then it gives you some time to even grade further. But those shift differentials really are the thing that drive where people want to work, because your most critical ones, critical need differential, you could assign it to any.
Yeah.
Well, I like the idea, but you're going to have a very tough time pulling it back.
Oh, you will.
I mean,
you do.
No matter how many applicants you
do.
get, once you start paying that and having that in there as part of the work
One of the places.
history, philosophy.
One of the places I worked at, those differentials would alter dependent upon need, and that's why I started thinking about it after.
I pay time and a half at Ashgrove
Yeah.
on Sundays.
Yeah,
You got 70 cents for afternoons, and you got $1.25 for working midnights.
And to tell you the truth, I think that helps because a lot of the discussion that we had with Kyle and those guys was trying to get people work every single Saturday, especially when the Saturdays are the craziest, worst time to work. You know, some of the scale house people, getting them to work and stay there because, let's face it, the biggest problem a lot of those guys is training and providing good service. And so if you're willing to work the weekend shift differential of $1 or whatever you come up with, but I think that's the way that you do it because then if you need to change it, you can change it. If you need it to go away because, hey, all of a sudden we've got all the gel applicants or all the people you can find, this year there's not going to be a, you know, or maybe that you scale it down or scale it up.
And process-wise, you could implement a critical need differential with like a resolution or a memo with a specific time frame.
Yep.
And then once that time frame ends, it ends, or else you
Yeah.
Well, and just as I was thinking about that, I was doing some reading, and you start thinking about some of these critical times that you need these people. You could apply it to the wellness complex when you think about you have all these concerts, you have all this stuff, you have all these things that, hey, there's a differential up there that, you know, or not, or however you want to do
Well,
that.
do you want to keep it with mandated services or?
Well,
not
well, you do it with mandated or critical need services is what I do. Critical need services is the way then there's a lot more, what's a critical need service? Well, elections is a mandated thing, but a critical need inside elections would be that one person or two people that you have to have there, or somebody in your office specifically. The service is the mandated, not the people inside. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So if you address it as a critical need, because then you could say, hey, right now we're trying. We're still the function. It's not an emergency, but it is a critical need. We've got to have somebody that's there.
The only reason I was asking is because where we did this retention stipend, and then that opened the can of worms for non-mandated,
Well,
even grant entities wanting the same thing.
you would still have to have though the money budgeted inside your department for those.
I'm with Ernie though. Help me understand how you would walk that back. So I sign on, and I got a shift differential of, again,
Yeah.
I'm trading $3 an hour, and now all of a sudden the positions are filled, and we say, okay, well, your shift differential now goes to $1 an hour.
It might not even be necessarily that drastic. What I'm saying is when you have shift differentials, you normally would adjust your shift. So if you have two baseline operators, okay, and the operator position we're just going to say is, and this is a hypothetical, $20 an hour. We're going to say the landfill shift differential is $3 an hour, so it would be $23 total. Well, as we look at it, that yeah, we're getting plenty of people and applicants or whatever, it's not as critical then, maybe we don't ever adjust that. You don't adjust the differential, you're just adjusting the base then. So the next year or 2 years, hey, instead of the operator making $20, you're going to move it to 21, but the differential goes to $2 because it still keeps that. Does that make sense? That's where you're adjusting that until your wages then catch up with the differential. You use the differential to absorb out whenever you make a pay raise or cost of living adjustment. Well,
honestly,
Yeah.
that's in the civilian side. I had that happen a lot. Is how we do that. Now, if you had one specific area that was, hey, it was really hard, or you have that was the driving area that you had to have, and we would have differential changes that would be made. Hey, very rarely they wouldn't go down, but what you would do is the base wage would be the change.
well, I like the idea of it, and I like that it's able to work with your families, and then you can put this differential on there to,
Yeah, so when you had a COLA increase, let's say that we're not having a shortage of people, okay? And so we're at and again, you're up there, it's a $20 an hour base rate for that family job position. Well, we're going to make a COLA increase next year in the budget because you're going to do a 1.5% or 2% increase. If the family gets it, you don't necessarily have to adjust the
differential.
the
you don't
differential,
adjust.
or you could even reduce the differential. So you could say, hey, we're going to make the family differential go to $22 an hour. We're going to reduce the differential $1, so it's still $23 up there, but we're not
So COLAs would help.
bring out the
Even things
differentials.
out.
That's how you bring the
So-
differentials and make them go away.
Okay.
So you don't really take it,
So you might have some
It's kind of
departments.
short-term
Yeah,
fix, but maybe.
but you could leave it though if you have but you're.
Track of that, I'm sorry.
So, okay, so this.
I understand
yeah.
what you're saying, but from an employee perspective, I sign on for a $3 an hour difference over
And they're
Mhm.
doing
Bridge.
something like
Mhm.
this.
And now a year later, I'm only $1 different.
Mhm.
With the
2 years
rate they
later,
go.
we're the same.
So you might want to go to Road and Bridge then. And that's your option then. You can go to Road and Bridge, you can go do whatever you want to go do. Is that differential starts, but what you're doing is you're trying to incentivize somebody to go into that job. Now, if you have enough people, it's a supply and demand issue. If you have 15 people that are willing to go work for an extra $1, then you're not going to want to do that differential and you work a different shift.
But it's still gonna be a morale issue.
It is a morale
It's
issue.
gonna be a
It's
definite
always going to be a
morale
morale issue. But the problem is there's no other way then, because your job descriptions are the same. Well, you're going to work, then you're going to set your pay based upon shifts, or based upon a specific department, or how do you do something then that would entice those areas that we're having a really hard time filling, but we can't get things to work through. And if you don't want to make it a permanent increase on the budget, that's how you would have to do it. I don't see any other way that you could put, because a differential is not a pay increase. A differential is not a base pay.
Base pay.
It is because you want to do this. So if somebody decides, if you can't go in and cut somebody's wages, I mean, you could, but that would be
See, that's how I would kind of view it in that year two, when that gap goes from a $3 difference to $1.50. I would view that as you just.
well, but it might not. But it might go up again the next year when nobody else got a COLA. You might have a year where your cost of living really didn't change, and maybe you only got a 1.5%. But maybe there was a differential that you wanted to decide that, hey, that differential we actually need to raise by $5. I mean, you're going to play with that differential depending upon the needs of that department. If that department is fully staffed and everybody's there, yeah, you might play with that differential. You might play with that, but it all depends
That
on
makes
the
it hard
need.
for an employee on an individual level to budget their life.
Well, it'd be based on usually
it-
a yearly. You're not going
it's
to
just-
do it, change it
No,
every
no,
week.
even that though,
Yeah.
is difficult. I like the idea and the creative thought behind it. Then we have to figure something out.
Well, I think it's a good idea, honestly, but
And I'm not saying every
I'm not-
department.
I'm
No.
not saying you're gonna cut it though. That's the part. Once you've said it, I mean,
Well,
you know that you're gonna have $1. If you choose to work this shift and you work Saturdays, you get this
now,
benefit.
what you might
If
say
you
is
choose to change your shift
is your
and
differential.
go off Saturday, you're the one that chose,
Right.
Yeah.
you lose the money.
Now, you might say though in a year, okay, yeah, I signed up for a $3 an hour bump to work the landfill, so I'm making 23. Well, we're going to move all operators. We're just going to move all operators to just 25 and call it good.
Then you could get rid of the
The
differential.
differential goes away.
Right.
And now, if you're mad that you don't get your weekend differential and you're getting paid $1 or $2 more an hour or to do that, that's your own decision. And if you want to go to a different department, but if your labor pool is increased and you have people willing to come in and work, then that's the supply and demand issue where I'm sorry then, that's what you're going to do. But then all of a sudden you have another labor shortage and you need to put that differential back in place.
So it's kind of to play with the positions that are in high demand.
High demand
It's a way to
positions,
offset that.
high demand and critical positions that need to be
But then
filled,
when they catch up,
you
but
phase it
then you
out.
still have to be competitive
Yep.
with your salaries so that you don't turn around and lose those people if you adjust the wages.
You're not.
It'll be
Yeah.
it'll be creative and have to be really,
So let's talk salaries a little bit. I mean, you brought up that deal when we walked downstairs,
What's that? What
the
did I bring up?
10% and the,
Oh.
call the department heads in.
Yeah, because, again, after going through this morning and, trying to drag my chin out of the mud, trying to think of creative ways to do this, I'm wondering if we don't come back with the HR recommendation, here's what our salary projection is. If we give everybody arbitrary number, 10% raise, okay? Whole county goes
let's
up.
use a realistic, like 3 or 4%.
No,
You
well,
put-
well,
You don't
let's-
want to put 10 out there because then
Yeah.
people are like,
Mhm.
woohoo, 10%.
no,
It's totally
listen,
arbitrary, so
Okay.
we say, all right, we're gonna give everybody a 10% raise. Now, then we bring all the department heads in and say, okay, we've done our part and said, we're willing to raise you 10%. You do your part and find us 10% somewhere else. that
So what are you
everybody
going to
else
do
can-
on a department that is heavy with?
A and no B.
Here, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like,
A and B.
Again, that's
Matt
where,
Olson.
that's
Matt
where,
Olson has no B budget.
that's where all of the department heads come together and say, all right, where can we make cuts? What
This is a group,
services
you
can we
guys gotta,
cut?
you guys gotta get together as a group and see what we
This is a
can.
little late in the process to be
No.
trying to work that through, only in the aspect of, we've got 3 weeks that we can get the clerk's recommendation done. We're not going to get departments to cut that kind of money. We're going to have to cut it.
I mean,
We
we'll
can
just have
talk
to
to
do it.
departments
But
to
that was,
help.
that was kind of the thought of, all right, let's see, if we're gonna try and get creative,
Right.
let's give them the
Well,
raise
you-
they're asking.
But as you
7%,
talk-
5%,
As you talk to department heads,
right.
okay?
Yeah, I mean, and maybe-
Here's a
And it
thing
might-
that we're talking about.
And it might
Right.
not be
You guys got buy-in in this to prove that you are the leader in that group.
Right.
Right.
well, and you might
And
not,
not us have to make the decision for them.
and maybe it's, hey, we're planning on a, we were planning on a 3.5 or 4 or whatever, and we're gonna try and get to a 7, 8, or 9 or whatever. You guys gotta make up that other 3 or 4 or 5%. It might not be the full percentage across the board, because we were planning on something, but we're trying to do what we can. That's where it's gonna have to come. I mean, we're gonna have to come up with ways that way. I mean,
Well, and what we're hearing in all the meetings is the A budget is the concern, the employees are the priority, and then it sounds like they're still wanting a lot in B.
Yeah.
And we may just have to take that message, like, you guys told me this is the
And-
priority, so this
And
is how we're
that's
budgeting.
that's something that we do every year. When we
Yeah.
get to this point, we contact every department again, and we go through it just like you're saying. And every year, okay, what's your priorities? You ask for these things, can't happen. And so we do that process every year anyway. So,
well,
and
we
this year's
gotta
just gonna be a little
we gotta
thicker.
be careful, because if they're still asking for a contemplated budget of expense, and they wanna make, especially the other elected officials, and if they wanna make a big deal, it's gotta come to us to make that decision, to cut it and gut it, or whatever we're doing. And that's the whole thing, is we're asking and saying, hey, in the budgetary process, it says all contemplated expenses must be presented. That's technically what the clerk's recommendation is. We're asking you guys to give the clerk's recommendation as a contemplated knowing, because otherwise it's gonna get to us and it's gonna go,
Right.
because we can't make it happen. And so that's where, how do we do it? That's because, like I said, your shift differentials will handle some people. There's some other departments that are based upon enterprise and operational funds that you can handle some different things in. You can offset it by employee slots that aren't filled, but we're still gonna come down to the point, we still probably have to, we're,
What services are gonna be,
yeah, what service are we cutting now?
in order to give everybody a raise, what services are gonna suffer?
Or do we say right now, every position that's not filled is on a hiring freeze till further notice? How many open positions do we have in the entire county? If everybody wants a pay raise, there's right there. And that's
Some departments can't do without.
well, that's what we're saying though. That's the problem, is to make just that blatant, arbitrary, across the board decision might work great for, hey, the sheriff's office has 11 open positions that they haven't filled in 2 years. So them all of a sudden get put on a hiring freeze. They're only allowed to hire 4 people. For them, that's really not okay, we've done it. Your office, some of these other things that we've had where you only have 1 opening,
Yeah.
that's the hard part. You're gonna,
Well, and you, even with 1 opening, there's some people that can't do it.
well, yeah, I mean, you look at some of these departments,
So-
especially when they're a department of like 2, or department of 3,
Yeah.
that's, I think you're gonna have to have a combination of some of this stuff that way. We've got to get
We're
departments
just
to
gonna
whittle
have,
down.
it's all right, we're just gonna have to get creative.
Yeah.
We can do it.
Where are we,
So in reality, what percentage are we talking?
yeah, where are we at?
And honestly, we haven't gotten that far yet. So what we can do within the clerk's recommendation is we can start putting numbers together.
Well,
And then maybe once we get a little bit farther and say, okay, this is how much money we think we can play with between what you've said we can do in property taxes and what we saw as blatant easy cuts, then what we can do is see what we think we can fund. And if we need to, we can come back before you, if it gets to that point, before we present to you on the 13th of July,
Well-
and say, okay, so this is where we're at. You want us to get more aggressive or not? And we could try to do it that way. That way we can get more done at the beginning than when it gets turned over to you.
What's your goal?
I
well,
mean, what's my goal?
we need,
Percentage. Combination of percentage or
I think the big thing is you got to know what we have to work with money-wise total first. We need values to come in, and and to follow statutory, and the big constitutional thing is wages are supposed to be done right here at this table. It's not supposed to be a recommendation even in the clerk's budget come through. It should be something coming from us saying, but
Right.
we need to know the total dollar of what we have to work with. We still don't have values firmed up yet. We still don't have some of that, so we're still kind of swagging it. And so I really think we should find out what Bs can go away, what we can free up there. Recommendation from Ryan, probably here a little bit, once we kind of have a little bit more solid number of what actual, I mean, we know, we heard a number today, but that's a pretty wild swag of valuations. And we're not going to have that total number for a little bit, for another 2 or 3 weeks.
Well, we won't have it by the time we give you the clerk's recommendation.
No, but we'll have a better estimate.
Yeah.
I think in general, I would, just the very, very bare bones, I hope that we could do a step for everyone at least with what, and then just the variable is going to be the percentage of what we can do beyond that. I'd like to see step and COLA.
What is a step? 1.5%?
1.4,
Yep.
Okay, and then a COLA, what are you thinking for a COLA?
whatever we can afford.
Whatever we can afford, hopefully 3% is what I
So-
would hope for. So that gets them up to about a 4.5.
I would really love, I know this is going to sound crazy and, don't hold me to it, but I would really love to have a 5% increase. I mean, really, you got to have something, I mean, that's.
Well, last year we said 4, and we worked hard to get to that.
Yep. And if we
And
could,
that we did 1.5 increase, we didn't take the full 3. So
if we could get to
if we can at
5,
least kind of say a 5, that's a goal, and work towards that in working together.
if the money plant downstairs, that just prints the magic money or whatever, if by some odd reason it comes up and there's funds available that you could have a 5, 5.5, 6, anything above 5, great. That's awesome. And we'll take whatever we can get.
And that's the rationale for this meeting, is just to get the direction of where you want us to start going, because you do set the salaries. So if what we could work towards is the step, and then try as high as we can of a COLA, then that gives us the direction to try and achieve. And then what about, so on the landfill and the jail employees? Because the landfill employees got the retention stipends to try to get people to apply and stay, and the jail did the same thing. Do you want us to do a little bit more on those two?
But I wouldn't do more. That's
Get
where
'em
I
to the-
talk about
yeah, get 'em to
the
their
per
point.
diem, the
Well, that's where I'd use the shift differential.
shift difference.
That's where I'd use the shift
Okay.
difference, and Ryan,
Yeah.
and I think maybe it's a little research on our side to talk and see if what we could come up with, because those are the two departments that I don't see as,
We could work with that.
it's gonna be very difficult until there's a downturn of the economy to get more people to apply at the landfill
And the jail.
and the jail.
Okay.
And so if you can do something like that, I mean, I wouldn't do a shift differential for every single person in the county.
No.
But for those two departments,
No.
I don't see it going
Just-
away
I would
anytime
say
soon.
only those two,
I would say
really.
those two are the ones that, your sworn law enforcement officers and landfill operators.
And the other reason I asked is because if we, say we can pull a 5%,
Mhm.
and then a step, that's only 6.4, and these people are currently getting retentions of a little bit more, so we don't want to put them backwards.
Well, we already had that discussion.
Yeah.
The
I-
retention goes
I
away.
know.
Yeah.
But
Well-
it hasn't helped with the jail or the landfill because we still have vacancies.
But that
D6
shift- The
is
shift differential
much
should
better.
help with that.
Yep.
Yeah, that would,
Yeah.
But
that's
if we
what,
can do that shift differential,
Yeah.
that puts us back where we need to be to keep them.
well,
So I just needed the direction of
And-
where you wanted us to
and to tell you the
work
truth, I think that
towards.
really solves Kyle's problem sometimes if you have a good shift differential for the weekends and some of that other stuff, because they can't get guys, and again, the landfill is something that we have to have operating. Roads, if we're just chip sealing and not doing asphalt this year because everybody's up to landfill, sorry, we gotta put our garbage somewhere. I have 4-wheel drive in my truck and I can slow down and not hit potholes. I mean, that's really, is that, you know,
But that gives us the direction we need
okay.
from you guys, so.
Now, sorry. Now, when I did my report early on, there was a small list of employees that either weren't on the table or I felt like they were just plain misclassified because of internal comparison, right? Are we gonna do anything with those?
I think we get the people on the schedule, but other than that, if we're not doing great adjustments for,
The one in your department.
Yes.
In archives.
Yep,
oh,
Yeah,
That one.
that was one example.
That one, I mean, that one is,
yes.
it needs to be
substantially.
corrected.
And I think
Yep.
there was a few in probation that were super.
Weird.
They seemed out of whack to me.
Okay, we'll look at those two.
Okay.
But we want to get the fair people on the schedule.
I-
And then, but what we'll do is just try to see where we place them, and we'll work with you on that.
Okay.
But in some ways, in my opinion, it will bite you if you adjust a few grades
Mhm.
and not everybody, because the whole goal was to work on salaries.
Mhm.
And it'll be like, oh, great, so you chose this
If
and
there's-
this, but not everybody. So
Well,
But if
that's
it-
just the way that it is.
If it's just out of whack.
If there's just,
not a big
if there's some
list,
very few ones that are just
Yeah.
really screwy, yell all you want. But, I mean, I'm not talking about going in and taking out whole departments and doing whatever. I'm
Right.
talking, hey, person A is at 18% less than everyone else in their department with no reason. That's a person that would, I mean, those are the things that need to get fixed.
But not like adjusting all the attorneys and all of
No.
those. Those were the
Okay.
ones I was talking
No.
for. We don't want to do all of those, because if you can't do a full thorough exam, it's
Yeah.
going to create
No.
more hate and
I think
discontent
it's-
than.
There's just a couple,
There shouldn't be more than a handful.
I think, yep, I'm thinking 3 or 4 people that are,
And all the others, we're not gonna do. I mean, if we're gonna do this and try to get everybody 6% or 5.5% or whatever,
I was 5 to 7. That's
Yeah.
my range.
5 to 7, then
I'm gonna
We
bare
got limit
minimum,
on
we're gonna
those.
be at
we're,
5%.
we're doing everything that we can possible, in my opinion.
Well, and like I said, some of those ones that if jobs haven't been filled in some of those offices, maybe we just put a hiring freeze on them till July and use those other wages as your differential or whatever you want to try and do something with it. If that's what we can do, great.
Now, another quick clarification on steps. So if somebody's at market, do you want to do, if people have been at market in the past, you have done step stipends, a 1.4% stipend for those individuals. Do you want to do that or nothing? I'm good either way, just need to know how to do
if
it.
they're at market, they're at market,
Well-
I
Okay.
think.
Can,
But I think the problem is we're in an inflationary part. So we got to take and not look at we got to look at the positions, and the position themselves is the problem that and then we run into a salary compression issue later, is if we take this because we're making this decision, we take every position and do a 5%.
That's,
And drag,
Right.
we drag the whole thing no matter what.
Right,
but
but,
still, if you're step 10, that won't,
but if you're at a step 1,
the step won't help.
well, we have this
Step two.
conversation every year, that I'm,
Yeah.
we have it. And we either have to start giving steps, or we just do COLA. I mean, that's just plain and
Yeah.
simple.
but
And if you are at a point where we don't need to give steps this time and we just did COLA because we're gonna revamp the whole system,
which I think we might be.
then do we just give COLA at this
true.
time? But we kick this can down the road forever, and we can't keep
Yeah.
doing it.
And, you know, and I brought it up, and I don't know the feasibility at this point in the game, but, you know, back in the 2008 BPA, and you guys know this, they had the only 5 steps,
Mhm.
right? And those went, you know, the 15%, right? So there was, but beyond those 5 steps, there was this freedom, right, to make
that
these
was all
changes up to 40%.
Based on performance evaluations.
Based on performance. So-
Which we're not
So
doing.
there was a range from basically a 40% from the minimum to the max. And when we made that change a few years ago, we cut off all that
We never
backside.
used those.
You never used
We
it?
never used those.
They
Not
wanted
even
to,
when
and
they
they-
implemented, we never did it.
But-
From what I understand, I wasn't here, but they said that
15% is a
they
very narrow
implemented
band.
part of it, and then the next year they didn't, and
Yep, that's
and
right.
that's what I
That's
keep
right.
hearing
Yeah, and so-
from everybody that I
Yeah,
talk
we-
to.
And I wouldn't
never-
propose going back there, but what I would say is I still think from step 1 to step 10, 15%, that's not very much.
No, but,
And I would say going up to maybe step 11, step 12
but I think
would
that's
make
gonna,
sense to me.
that's gonna be part of a bigger implementation of everything. At this point, because, I mean, we're due for an
Right.
overhaul. We're due for all jobs to be reviewed and compared. We're due for the salary table maybe to be adjusted. But in order to adjust that salary table, you're gonna have to look at the grades, because the reason we have the 10 the way we have it is so that when you're
Well-
a detention deputy and you promote to a sheriff deputy, you're not taking a pay cut, or you're not being moved higher than somebody that's already in that position. And I think it's gonna take a bigger analysis to look at that big picture rather than just adjusting the scale and then setting ourselves up for failure, which we just fixed 3 years ago.
Well, and I think the biggest thing is that it's what you found and everybody found is we started pulling at this mess. It's a lot bigger than it's just, we were anticipating that most of the job descriptions and grades and everything were a lot more accurate than what they were. There's a lot of them that I think that need to be completely overhauled. And it needs to be not just a department head writing it, it needs to be the HR director, you know what I mean? You guys need to have some, there's some of them that I can tell that nobody ever reviewed that. It's like, wow, this is like Superman on, and yeah, you should be paying this person $200,000 because somebody just knew how to write. And that's why I say, we have a lot of these problems in here, and if we can't go through and get them fixed right now, but the problem is if we're correcting for cost of living then we do no steps, no grades, and we just drag everybody over. We move everybody then. We move all of the base rates, and boom, there you go, and you go from there.
Well, and I agree, there's some things that are gonna take a deep dive, take a lot of work, take a big overhaul. But there's also some low hanging fruit.
There is.
Right?
Yep.
And I hear what you're saying about kind of overhaul, but adding a step 11, I don't think would be an overhaul. I think it would just be,
A Band-Aid.
well, it could get us through another year without,
And I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in, let's take care of this year, and then that has to be the priority. And it's been said for 4 years,
Well,
since we've been here.
I still come back though. Everybody says, well, we got to have another step or another this. You look at DOD and GSA pay tables. You hit the final step, and it doesn't matter. I've been in service now for 22 years. I hit the step at 16 years. The only time I ever get a pay raise is if I get a promotion. Not because I've been in my job for so long, they say, hey, you should be fully trained at your position by this time. The only time I get a pay raise is if there is a cost of living adjustment to the whole table.
but if you look at those tables, between the first and last step, it's like 30% or more.
Well, it depends on what rank it is and where it's at.
Well, what it comes down to is at some point you become proficient in that job.
Yeah, and
Right.
And you max out. So whether that's at 15%, 14%, or 30%, that's going to be a bigger discussion, I think. And I think we're not going to be able to solve it at this point in the budget process. So
Steps
it's
need to be
something-
associated with evaluations.
Well,
I mean, if you're not talking to your people, then why not just give a percentage on your COLA? Because the step doesn't matter, because you've never evaluated anybody.
It's true.
But, I mean, if you've been working in a place for a year, 2, 3 years, you've learned some things, and you're more valuable than someone just walking right in, evaluation or no.
yeah, but then we can run into these favorite
Yeah,
words
maybe,
called
maybe.
arbitrary and capricious.
Maybe you've learned the tricks of the trade and you're not valuable,
You hide better.
because you didn't have an evaluation.
Well, and that's what I come back to is then are we just going to arbitrarily determine who's going to get a pay raise or not? Because wow, that's going to be a fun. You want to talk about a morale killer right now?
Yeah, you can't do that.
Because there's no, and that's what I'm saying. Probably the easiest thing is just drag the whole table and move it 5% over or 6% over and call it, because you're going to need to go through, and then budgeting for the pay tables needs to start like when do we approve the budget? When's the final day to approve the budget?
August 30th, I think.
So on August 30th, if that's when we approve the budget, September 1st, we need to start on the pay tables then for next year.
I think we start on
And-
it now.
Well, yeah, well, I was trying to be nice and let you get through the
Oh,
budget.
no, I'm
before-
not working on this. This is Ryan.
No, Ryan's already, and the problem is Ryan has a big chunk that's there. There's a lot of stuff that we could write, but
Right.
there's a lot of stuff that's into the departments
Yeah.
that has to be
There's a
done.
phase
Yeah.
2. that
There's a
needs to
phase,
happen.
there's a lot of
Yeah.
stuff.
And there's also
Yeah.
some of the work you did, I think we need to fine tune on some of
Definitely.
the job descriptions, because just looking at the job descriptions don't necessarily tell you what's comparable to other entities.
Yeah.
And there were a few tweaks that needed made
And that's where I'd say you can go ahead and have a committee go over the job descriptions.
Get through it and get to, well, and the problem is I've looked at some of them lately. There's things that we're asking for in some of our job descriptions that other entities don't require people to do.
Yeah.
And there's other job descriptions that we have that we are not requiring that other entities require. So while we can weigh and balance everybody else around us, it still comes back to the job descriptions that we put in place have to be realistic job descriptions across the board.
And there needs to be a foundation underneath it of descriptions of the,
Yep.
that we're gonna
Like-
work on.
Like I said,
Yeah.
an operator, whether it's at the landfill, road and bridge, or wellness complex, if you're requiring a CDL and this and this and this,
Yeah.
the job description's the exact same. You are proficient in all this stuff. If you're gonna be a senior level operator in all of these proficient of pieces of equipment, it shouldn't be each department writing their different, no, it should just be, this is a senior level operator. There you go. That's, you know, it's amazing how we have all these different things because, well, but I like them to be able to have a CDL and be able to, you know, I'm gonna add 3 different lines and so they should be paid more, which I'm not faulting people for trying to get the people paid more. But the problem is we've got to really calibrate those job descriptions then across
Yeah.
administrative
I got a plan.
assistants to senior executive level administrative assistant, or an administrative assistant is different,
Yeah.
you know? Scale them and put them correctly.
We combined a lot of admin jobs, and I think those need brought back out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because they're not.
And
Probably
actually,
they should be.
I
Bob
was
had a whole bunch of
wanting to bring this up because I have a admin generalist job family with descriptions of the different levels and requirements, and I'd like to make a request to the different elected officials to have some, especially with those that have those positions, to get someone from their department to work with me on a group, a task force, to finish that off, and then do that family by family.
Yeah.
And
That's the
so,
first task force on actually says, yeah. Let's do it.
I'm ready to hit the send button today
Okay,
on that.
so
But
we will work
that's
on,
phase 2 stuff.
okay,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so for budget for this year, we'll work on getting as much of a COLA as possible, and then try to figure out some sort of shift differential for the landfill and the jail, and we'll adjust those few individuals that are just completely out of whack grade-wise. That work?
Yep.
Don't worry about steps. Don't
If
complicate
if
it.
you're that close and to steps, why are we messing?
Yep, that's,
Why don't we
that's
just do the
true.
COLA?
If we're gonna be able to implement the
I mean,
whole
I don't
new
know.
structure
I don't know how you-
next year of what I call your blue book,
Exactly.
Verbatim.
Yeah.
then,
Actually, for the last 2
then
years.
if we're that close, then just do COLA and go for it.
And that's the problem.
Pissed.
And that's the problem. We can't just,
What's wrong?
well,
This is the same conversation we've had the last 2 years.
It has. But when we get salaries in March or April, and we've started budget, it's a little late to try to do a full revamp on salaries when we don't get them until the last minute. We need those things in December.
Agreed.
Because
Yeah.
you can't work through the whole process in,
well,
The
The time we
difference
have.
this year, though, is I think that Ryan has, for the first time since I've been here, a really good rough draft. I mean, we have the blue book there that is phase 1, and that was a lot of work, not an easy thing. So we have progressed. It's just a tedious process. To get it right, to do it right, takes time.
and I hate to say it, they interject, there was the plan that was done, what, 4 years ago, and phase 1 was thought out really awesome, and phase 2 was kind of not, and we've been suffering from phase 2.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of it, there's been a lot of stuff, especially in the lack of your office before you came in, that there was a lot, I think a lot of us thought that those office descriptions and things were a little bit more up to date than what they are. Or now, I mean, there's been a lot of work to change and bring some of those full. But again, it comes back to the same problem. We've got to get started then for.
I think if Ryan gets as much work done in this coming year as he did this last year, we'll be ready to implement a real system next year.
Yeah.
we just need to have it by January 1, because then that builds a couple
Okay.
of months that then in January and February, we can finish tweaking it before the budget process.
Steps with evaluation.
Well,
Well, that's the other thing too, is if you're going to implement that steps with evaluations, we got to start evaluating. Are we evaluating on fiscal year? Are you evaluating on calendar year? And if we're going to evaluate on fiscal year, starting October 1 of this year, evaluations
do it.
need to start. And you need to start then with that initial counseling of October 1. This is, I'm setting task, condition, and standard. And you're having that then to where that, when is that evaluation going to be due? And what are you doing to base that off of for your step increase? Do you do a full, because typically you're a full year, you've worked all this last year, I give your evaluation moving into this year's budget. So we would be then, you'd have to figure out how to do that. How are we going to do those evaluations? That's a big thing that we're missing right now. Who's doing them? When are we doing them? How are we doing them? What's the format we're doing them? We've done a lot of work into this, but that's one big key right here.
That's all part of this.
And
That-
I have the evaluation form I presented earlier.
Mhm.
I have a training on performance evaluation scheduled for the third week of next month.
Yeah. So if we're gonna,
it's already on the
so if we're gonna
schedule
kick
and
them,
advertised.
so if you're gonna kick them October 1, everybody's got to be trained to be ready to execute, be ready to do that.
Mhm.
And then how are you going to base next year's budget then? Because you won't have a full year of evaluation. Are you going to base it on a partial evaluation?
Yeah, because we haven't had
And,
anything
and,
yet.
and that's fine. And that's fine.
Yep.
But that's
And we're moving
Well,
forward.
If we do an evaluation on October 1 for this past year,
do it in April again.
and
6 months.
and then do it again, well, even just this last year, just take the one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've been down this road before, okay, and I want, in my HR brain, I have these separate, some things are totally separate, right? So the grades and the tables and the job families, that's one thing altogether. And it should not be mixed up at all with steps or these evaluations, because the one thing's the positions, one thing's the people in the positions,
Yep.
right? And so when we're talking about the steps, some of the hurdles you're going to run into would be, I don't have a supervisor because that position's vacant right now. Or maybe my supervisor.
You got an elected official.
Yep.
Yep, I think elected officials do them.
Everyone has an elected official.
Okay.
And that's who it basically will end up with, the
And maybe I have an
responsibility.
elected official that's checked out and didn't do them.
Then you have a chief deputy.
Mhm.
Yep,
Okay,
they have a chief deputy.
because it could be not the employee's fault that they don't get one.
Yeah.
And we got to be watchful. I've seen that before.
You're right.
You're right, but that's
I'd love to
100%.
get to that point.
Yeah, that would be great.
That's
I
a great
agree.
problem to have.
Okay.
I think if I can't do it, I think it falls on me. If I can't do it, Carrie's gonna do it.
Okay.
And that goes
I'm
around.
going to assign Scott. Scott's going to evaluate his people. And I'll evaluate Scott. I mean, but it eventually comes to me.
Right?
I'm part of Scott's evaluation is how he has evaluated
do it? Yeah,
all his
sure.
people.
Okay. Okay.
If an elected official's checked out, that elected official won't get a raise either.
So we'll just have to have a
Well, then you-
department head elected official meeting to
Yeah.
start kicking that off so that it's countywide,
Well,
not
Yeah,
just at your
sooner
round
the
table.
better.
And, but again, it comes back to, like in this one though, the main push of what we're doing for changing of wages is not based upon people. This is based
No.
upon
We gotta keep that
inflationary.
separate.
This is a grade
Yes.
then. This is the overall base rate of the table is changing. The bottom number that the
Right.
table starts at.
Yes.
We're doing a market adjustment.
And I've had conversations with department heads that surprised me, because I assumed they knew what COLA was,
No.
and they don't. And so we gotta, seriously.
Depends on who you're talking.
And so we need to have to explain what that means too.
If they're looking at their Percy, they know what to call it.
True.
Yeah.
Cool.
So we've got our direction.
Okay.
We'll work toward that, and if there's any updates necessary, we'll get with you guys during BOE. But we've done it
Yeah.
a few times.
No,
Just once or twice.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate this process, and thank you very much for including me in, and I did have one thought for next fiscal year. Throughout the year, there's gonna be, especially as we're working on position descriptions, every now and then will come to me, and I'll analyze it, look at my criteria, and say, you know what, based on the way it's written, that probably merits a a different grade, right? And so what I've been thinking in my mind is for a process for next year is I start making a list of those. And then come January or whatever, I have that list that then will be presented. And my responsibility as HR director is not to advocate for that because is there budget? Is this what we should be doing? That's for the department and you guys. But for HR's role, as it's written, this is where it falls, right? And I kind of want to keep myself in that realm to be able to help classify that way. And so I feel like if I see position descriptions come to me throughout the year that merit a upgrade or something, that's how I would handle those, because if that sounds okay.
So if you communicate with the department and say, okay, so Jen, yes, I agree, those positions should be a grade 7, put those in your budget request.
Yep.
When it comes, do that. What we did last week when we were meeting with people is anytime somebody had a grade adjustment, we were asking them, did that run through HR?
Yeah.
And so what we'll do for next year when we're doing grade adjustments is we'll just, if you keep a tally and then the departments keep a tally,
Okay.
we'll just add you as a part of the budget, a meeting or a couple hours and say, okay, these are the grade changes that were recommended, yes, no, and then we can run through those somehow through the process.
Sounds good. Maybe we can just do something where we can share that just
Yeah.
live.
Yeah.
So, okay. Because I get peppered with that all the time.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to have a process.
And grade adjustments traditionally don't happen except at beginning of fiscal year.
Right. And I do see it being HR involved, budget involved, and the commissioners.
Yeah, commission is the only one that can approve it,
At the end. Yeah.
so, yeah.
Well, we're actually the only ones constitutionally allowed to
Yeah.
change your salaries. And that's the whole thing that we got to make sure too, is there's some counties that it's gotten away from them where they just had department heads changing salaries.
And I'd like to spell out that procedure and,
It's called the salary approval form.
Yeah.
well.
That's why salary
Well, I
approval
mean,
form
asking,
isn't
But it
salary.
requires a
but even
position
before you go fill out
description and all
a
that.
salary rate approval form, you should be coming in here and asking if you're going to change something.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
That's the problem we have is people think, well, I just filled out salary rate approval form and I want the wages changed. I've already offered somebody a job and here you go. And the
No, you
commissioners
gotta
just have to
back up
sign it.
5
And
steps
there's not
first.
budget
Yeah.
authority, there's not anything back there.
Well, and
behind it.
that's why we've got the grades the way we have them. If anybody wants to change a grade, that has to come before
Yeah.
the board for approval,
Yep.
and then
Yeah.
that
Okay.
changes that.
Thank you. I'd like to put a procedure out there that kind of explains that. So they,
If you need to write it up, you can, otherwise it's pretty simple. If you want a grade change, it has to go before the board.
I'd like to.
Write it up. Write it up. We'll look at it. Anything else?